FIFA relies on the fact that the issues get talked about, but when the football starts, we forget. There are systems of fraud, there's systems of cover-ups of abuse, so many pernicious things. Camera operators are instructed, don't get that on camera, don't get that on film. Where in fact, this is a part of the global conversation. If you're going to expand a tournament to 40 teams around the world, you better be prepared for those politics to come too. But I do hope that despite the politics, people got a chance to embrace the joy.
The FIFA Men's World Cup is the world's marquee single-sport tournament, attracting billions of viewers and generating billions of dollars in revenue. What began quite modestly in Uruguay in 1930 with 13 teams has evolved into a sporting extravaganza that provides a global platform for the world's best male soccer players. It also serves as a playground for and plaything of strongmen presidents, celebrities, and billionaires. I'm Adrian Harewood, and this is In Bed with the Elephant. The Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci once wrote that soccer is, quote, the open-air kingdom of human loyalty, unquote. The late Uruguayan writer and soccer aficionado Eduardo Galeano noted that the game, quote, unravels the mysteries of the human soul, unquote. Soccer has been called the beautiful game. It captivates and enthralls people everywhere who revel in its artistry, power, creativity, elegance, and wit. The 2026 World Cup was a stage for soccer's biggest stars to shine, from Argentina's transcendent genius Lionel Messi to Spain's teenage wunderkind Lamine Yamal, from France's sharpshooter Kylian Mbappe and facilitator Michael Olise to England's super engine Jude Bellingham and super striker Harry Kane to Norway's otherworldly goal-scoring machine Erling Haaland. The 23rd edition of the tournament provided the world with spellbinding storylines, none better than the African nation of Cabo Verde and its charismatic goalkeeper, the 40-year-old Vojinha. The island nation of 500,000 people thrilled soccer fans around the globe with moments of brilliance and resilience. Teams from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Haiti, which hadn't been in the tournament for 52 years, galvanized their nations and created moments of pride and joy. For the first time in its history, Canada's men's national team got to the knockout stage of the World Cup, a watershed moment for Canadian soccer. A World Cup can transcend borders, uniting elements of the world and providing moments of collective communion. But it can also reveal and expose the persistence of geopolitical hierarchies, structural inequities, discrimination, and other abuses. Someone who is well placed to make sense of the complexities of soccer and the 2026 World Cup is Canadian sports journalist and soccer expert Shireen Ahmed. The Halifax-born Ahmed is a multi-platform journalist, TEDx speaker, mentor, and an award-winning sports activist. She's a co-creator and co-host of the feminist podcast Burn It All Down. She teaches journalism and sports media at Toronto Metropolitan University. She covered the World Cup for the CBC as a senior contributor. I spoke with her just before the quarterfinals of the tournament began. Shireen Ahmed, welcome to In Bed with the Elephant.
Thanks for having me, Adrian.
Shireen, perhaps I can start this way. What kind of a World Cup has it been for you?
Exhausting. It's been really fun. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's such a slog. It is a slog, but it's one that I enjoy tremendously. This is my fifth World Cup on the ground. So I've done 3 women's, and this is my second on the ground. And it has been enlightening. The topics that I want to speak about, and I often cover those intersections of race and politics and culture, those have absolutely happened. You know, there's definitely ways in which it's not just the football with me. It's issues around the football. I mean, in addition to the beautiful game that's being played and has enthralled us all, definitely the adjacent issues to this tournament are things that I like to look at.
You say the World Cup so far has been enlightening for you. What are you now enlightened about?
I actually have been very lucky in my career to have been connected with media from all over the world. And that informs how I practice journalism. But enlightened in the way that Canada has embraced soccer is kind of what I'm going to say. I've been a football fan my entire life. And this country has really come leaps and bounds in the last decade anyway, in how soccer is consumed here. It's usually consumed via lens of another country. Like people with hyphenated identities or immigrant experience, they root for their team back home. But enlightened in terms of what the possibilities are of fandom, and in a nice way. Like I think Canadians have approached this tournament with humility, knowing that they're not experts on a global scale. But just being really ready to take things in has been enlightening for me and positive, because I tend to look at things with a critical lens. So it's nice to be happy or positive from time to time.
And the country embraced its men's team.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt the catalyst for that particular type of embrace was actually Ismail Kone's very unfortunate injury. And when Ismail got injured, he had received man of the match in the match prior against Bosnia and Herzegovina.
He broke his leg, of course, yeah.
Tonight, Canada rallies around a star player after a devastating injury during yesterday's thrilling World Cup match.
He's been an incredible player, maybe our best player in the tournament so far.
Now they must play without a star player. 24-year-old Ismail Kone is now recovering from surgery in a Vancouver hospital. His World Cup dreams cut short after suffering a broken leg.
It was a horrible and very visual. It was on TV and it was a terrible injury. And I wasn't in the stadium, but my colleagues were. And I was watching live and you could hear a pin drop. But galvanizing from that and the way that the team moved forward was really, really interesting to me, and how that moment was used. And I've said Canada loves like an obstacle to overcome, be they considered sort of like the little engine that could in a way, or the David to a Goliath, like just this moment and the way that he responded by being absolutely himself. Ismail Kone is a lovely player, wonderful human, and very respectful. It was really, really nice to see that, and it opened my heart a bit.
You've gone as far as to call Canada a soccer nation. You really kind of emphasize that. What makes Canada a soccer nation?
It's the way that it is open to learning. And I love the fact that Canada, and I've said this repeatedly, is still kind of settling on its soccer identity. What does that look like? And for me, it doesn't look like one thing. It has to be dynamic. Like this isn't England in the 1950s. We're not going to have this like very specific story tradition. We have a squad that is a reflection of actual society. So many of these players are from immigrant experience and are immigrants themselves. They're racialized. It's very much authentic in the way that they are. They're also very humble players. And the approach is one that is for the people. And when I talk about soccer identity, how accessible is this to the people? And I found that Canada Soccer did an excellent job. And I'm someone who has very publicly been critical of Canada Soccer over the years in different iterations of drama that has ensued. But the way that Canada really reached out to soccer lovers and said, okay, even if you don't understand or know this game very well, there's something here for you. Be it the player stories, where you're from, the way the game is played, our opponents, the storylines. So for me, that is all a part of being a soccer nation, not just knowing the tactical strategy or knowing and understanding what a panenka is, like, what a howler is, like all these terms that people might not know, but having people be able to learn about that and unlearn things and relearn. And that was really, when I say enlightening, it was also learning for me in how you can become a soccer nation in this day and age.
When we think about the great soccer nations of the world, of course, we think about the Brazils, we think about the Italys, who, of course, haven't made the World Cup for a couple of sessions now, but we think about, for example, I don't know, maybe Argentina, we think about France, Spain, Germany, we think about the Netherlands as well. We think about countries that have something to say on the pitch, right? Their play on the pitch is almost an expression of who or what the nation represents. What do you think Canada has to say on the pitch?
We're here. We're ready. This is our game. We're absolutely somebody that you should be considering. And I had followed this. I was in Qatar for 2022 for the Men's World Cup. Canada wasn't actually taken as a serious competitor. It was more of a, oh, we're so happy you're here. Here's a participation ribbon. Canada came to play. Canada is a very different version of what they were in 2022. That speaks to the growth. It speaks to the commitment. of the development of the players and the possibilities. And that's really important. I actually find this idea of like the soccer legends and the storied countries. Italy hasn't been at a men's World Cup in 3 World Cup tournaments. Yeah. Germany's out. And Germany is always someone that, we kind of rely on for the very, very predictable, mechanical, tactical consistency. So soccer itself is rewriting some of those storylines, like Argentina, what that looks like and what they'll look like, as we move towards the championship. France for me is very complicated, but that's the thing. All of these histories are complicated. They're not seamless. They're not flawless. They are marred with sociological, psychological, social issues, political issues in those places. We've seen an emergence of smaller nations with the expansion of the tournament. Like Cabo Verde, literally stole everyone's heart. And were actually the heartbeat and the pulse of this entire tournament, almost dethroning Argentina, who won the last Men's World Cup. There's definitely storied traditions from a lot of Eurocentric nations, but to have that joy be expanded is really, really important.
So I take it you're a fan of FIFA's decision to expand from 32 to 48 teams, because there was a lot of concern expressed at the outset of this tournament that expanding the World Cup would dilute the quality of the product.
Yeah, no, I as somebody who's, been a sports journalist for a long time, that idea is expansion is not a bad thing. I have other concerns. I had carbon footprint concerns and climate issue concerns. I had concerns about hosting over 3 countries and accessibility. I've written about lack of visas available and exclusion of very specifically of certain nations. So I have concerns. It's funny. No one's ever used FAN and FIFA with me in the same sentence before. So thank you for that. That's a new experience for me. I'm never going to be angry at inclusion, but how that inclusion is applied is something that I will still comment on. Sure, there's 48 teams. The group stages were absolutely bananas. I was watching 14 hours of football a day, which is my job. And, I know it sounds rough, but the exhaustion of that and the intensity. But honestly, Adrian, it's intense no matter what. Whether there were 32 teams, I was still as exhausted after the group stages in the last Men's World Cup. So I think there's a place for it. We see how it's been done. There's definitely notes that have been taken around how it can be held, where it can be held. And the next iteration of this tournament will be co-hosted by Portugal, Spain, and Morocco. So we'll see what happens there and what it looks like and how frantic it will be.
There's a tendency for some people to want to separate sport and politics, but politics is ingrained in everything that we do. I know that you noted that the coach of Egypt, Hossam Hassan, a former star player for the Pharaohs, spoke out very passionately, made this impassioned speech about Palestine during a press conference. Can you tell us a little bit about why you see that intervention by Egypt's coach on the matter of Palestine as being particularly significant?
Well, I do, because it hasn't been prevalent on the world stage at this point, but for those that follow the Pharaohs or follow football in other parts of the world, the issue of Palestine is not new. And so we take in the World Cup from a Western media lens, where media, sports media in particular, contort themselves to avoid talking about this at any means necessary. Camera operators are instructed, don't get that on camera, don't get that on film, where in fact, this is a part of the global conversation. Justice is a part of the global conversation. One of the most vocal federations is actually Norway. Lisa Clapness, head of the Norwegian Federation, also known for being the first federation in Europe to pay men and women equally, has been very vocal about this. It's actually far more common than we think. Just Western media does a fantastic job of not exposing that. And the Irish Football Association is also similar. They have been very, very vocal on their stance about playing either friendlies against the state of Israel or whatnot. They've been making statements constantly about it. We've had issues before where the U20 team from Bosnia-Herzegovina refused to shake hands with their opponents when they played the state of Israel. So for people that are paying attention, this isn't some novel idea. And the ideas of justice and speaking about injustices in the world and against people are ingrained into some of these places that are competing in this tournament. If you're going to expand a tournament to 40 teams around the world with more representation, you better be prepared for those politics to come too.
Right. One thing that always seems to show up at these big competitions, certainly at the World Cup, is racism. Racism always seems to show its colors during World Cups. And this time around, from the Belgian coach Rudy Garcia to the Paraguayan senator Celeste Amarilla, who basically, said that Mbappe was raised by chimpanzees, Jose Chilivert, the former fine Paraguayan goalkeeper from the 1990s, who said that basically the French team, really, they're African. They're not really French. What do you make of how racism manifests itself during these competitions?
So the reality is, for me, very specifically, that racism never actually leaves a game. So this whole idea of racism emerges. No, racism is actually, until football becomes virulently anti-racist, like Dr. Angela Davis said, it's not enough to be non-racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. Football is not actively anti-racist. It's not. So these will always emerge. Always, always. It's of no surprise. And if anyone has covered the Euros before, saw how Marcus Rashford was treated, Raheem Sterling were treated.
After they missed their penalty kicks.
After they missed the penalty.
The defeat turned nasty as the three players who missed the penalty kicks became subject to racial abuse on social media.
Instead of, just a defeat becoming the headline this morning, it has been overshadowed by the racial abuse, racist abuse.
For some of them to be abused is unforgivable, really. I know a lot of that has come from abroad, but not all of it.
Racial abuse in football, in soccer, has been a big problem here for a while now.
English footy supporters behave badly after the game.
It's one of those things where you say it's shocking but not surprising. I mean, to see a mural of Marcus Rashford vandalized, unfortunately. I mean, the old expression for black soccer players is you're English when you win, you're black when you lose.
The focus of how Black and Afro Latinx players, or whatever, any iteration of Black players treated after is horrific. And the fact that this is allowed to continue, it makes me think the federations always issue a statement, we stand behind them. Do you really? Is your practice actively anti-racist? Do you have bans? I'm a big believer in bans of fans who are racist. You don't get a second shot. If you're going to say something heinous and attack somebody, you don't get a second shot. This is a privilege for you to participate in. It's not a right for you to be able to watch and abuse players. So I have very little tolerance for that kind of thing. I think that there's massive injustices within the sport of soccer, and I write about them often. What does it look like in terms of policy? What's the access for women? What does it look like? You've got a series of abusers that are participating in this tournament who with rape allegations and terrible cases against them. I have a lot of, there's a lot of misogyny, there's a lot of homophobia, there's a lot of xenophobia and racism as we see in soccer, all those things.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of those allegations of sexual assault, because we know Achraf Hakimi, the captain of the Moroccan team, has charges pending, rape charges pending. Thomas Partey, the captain of the Ghanaian team, also has similar charges. Ryan Mendes from Capo Verde, the captain of that team, also has these charges that cloud, over him. And he's been accused of sexual assault, of rape. Can you just tell us about your concern that there's a reluctance, even on the part of journalists, to talk about these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm somebody who wrote about Cristiano Ronaldo's, the rape allegations against him, years ago. And I think that there's a reluctance because there's a conflation of, this person's a great footballer, ergo, there should be some type of vindication. People are not okay with being uncomfortable and having those conversations. Two things can exist at the same time. Cristiano Ronaldo can be an incredibly important figure in Portuguese culture and sport, but he could also have been accused of doing something quite heinous. And those two truths can exist at the same time. It's complicated. It requires nuance to talk about it. A lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know because, again, there's this issue within sports media of people don't want to lose access to those players. When that happens, they're like, well, I don't want to report on this on a way because I'll get maligned by the federation or the club or the organization or the player. But the reality is journalists, and I take this extremely seriously, have an obligation to seek truth and tell truth, to be accurate and be fair. I'm not a PR machine. If there's something that happens, my duty is to actually, otherwise I might as well just work in comms. It's what's the point? And there requires the bravery. Also, there is a lack of comfort of many male journalists to know how to report on sexualized violence in sport. So they don't use toolkits, which are readily available from some organizations. They're reluctant to actually even talk about it. And I think that's a disservice, not only to the game of football, but to the fans that deserve to know.
I wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to In Bed with the Elephant. If you can, please follow us in the app that you're using. If you already follow us, thank you. And please do take the time to leave a rating or a review. It helps to get more people listening to our show. And please keep spreading the word about us to your networks. In a world drowning in misinformation and disinformation, never has the work of journalists been more important. That's why we here at In Bed with the Elephant are so grateful to our podcast's founding sponsor, Perfect Books, for their support of independent journalism. Perfect Books is an independent bookstore located at 258A Elgin Street in the heart of downtown Ottawa. Perfect Books, a store for book lovers.
This is all about that Flo Balogun red card.
That wasn't a foul. That wasn't even an infraction. That was two guys running full speed that happened to crash into each other. I think the referee's call was horrible. And nobody talks about that. They talk about the red card like it's fine.
It was handed out. That means that you get a 1-game suspension.
Red card. I didn't know what the hell a red card was. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding.
This would mean, essentially, that the best striker on the U.S. team would not be in this do-or-die match.
You know, it's one thing to penalize somebody for the game, but how do you penalize them for a game that hasn't been played yet? It's very unfair. You can't do that.
What we heard from the president, he got on the phone to FIFA president Gianni Infantino.
I did. I spoke to Gianni, who's highly respected. Yes, I asked for a review by FIFA.
He got a red card and a 1-game suspension. This was canceled by FIFA ahead of today's big US-Belgium match. A lot of dissent right now, a lot of very upset bodies within Europe and players.
One thing that has been revealed for all the world to see is how these institutions really operate when pressure is placed on them. We saw how FIFA reversed a 1-game suspension levied against the U.S. star striker Folarin Balogun. And it's been confirmed that the White House, indeed, Donald Trump, called Gianni Infantino, the head honcho at FIFA, and requested that he and the committee at FIFA review their ruling. And following that review, Balogun was reinstated and was able to play in the round of 16 game against Belgium. And I'm wondering if we're not recognizing how serious an intervention that was. What do you think are the ramifications of what Donald Trump did to basically engineer a decision in his country's favor?
I mean, this is of no surprise to anybody that's been following this, that's followed the FIFA Congress, and then before that, the draw, what it looked like, the Peace Prize, issuing of a Peace Prize, which was absurd, absolutely absurd. Anyone who knows Gianni Infantino and how he operates and how FIFA operates, like I have said that I think that FIFA acts like a Ponzi scheme or a mafia. In fact, the Mob Museum in the United States had an exhibit of FIFA. It's not new. So for anyone who's familiar with any of the ongoings, this isn't recent. There are systems of fraud. There's systems of cover-ups of abuse. There's systems of so many pernicious things that have happened.
But Shireen, this particular incident seems particularly egregious, right? That the fact that the president of the United States could intervene at a really, really critical time in the tournament.
See, I would argue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would argue with you.
Okay.
Cristiano Ronaldo had a red card issued against Ireland, and that was swiped away. I think Lionel Messi's foul against Algeria should have been an absolute red immediately, and that was this favoritism that we know that has always existed. It's not new. I'm not more horrified by Donald Trump calling Infantino. He's just being blatant about it. For anyone that's actually followed this game and followed these politics, this isn't new. It's expected and unsurprising. It's egregious. It doesn't mean it's new. Do I think Donald Trump is better or worse off than anything else? No. Like, he's horrific. Let's not make a mistake about that. But he's being so blatant. Like, it's so funny. I even made the point that The Swiss Football Federation issued a statement to force the Swiss out of neutrality because of your behavior is hilarious. And that's what happened. And I was really pleased that Belgium won in the way that they did. You can rescind a red card if you want. We're still going to beat you. So this whole brash and like on the world stage, the United States pretending to have some kind of authority or knowledge is laughable. They're the clowns of this tournament. And they proved that. And then Romelu Lukaku, who plays for Belgium, a storied player, fantastic. He comes out and his celebration dance is literally mocking the president of the United States. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he's not an American national. He played for Sweden. He's got Bosnian roots. Him making fun of Alexi Lalas on a panel with Thierry Henry filled my soul with happiness. The world is mocking the United States at a game that doesn't belong to the United States. The United States had an opportunity to do things differently. They had an opportunity to be good hosts. They had an opportunity to provide equal playing fields for people. They didn't do that. And they also don't have a soccer team that they can stand behind in any formidable way at all. So that's justice in itself. Ball don't lie, Adrian.
FIFA Commissioner Gianni Infantino announced more than 150 million ticket requests have been submitted in just a 15-day span. He says that's the highest number in World Cup history. It's partly because there are more games to look forward to than ever before. Tickets for Canada's opening game started at $1,300.
Many people opting for the communal experience of a watch party.
It's not unexpected with those prices.
FIFA slashed prices of some tickets after global fan backlash.
In a post to social media, FIFA writes in part, official attendance figures reflect the number of tickets scanned and spectators present within the stadium footprint. Through those first 12 batches, they scanned 99.5% of all available tickets.
Shireen, we've seen historic attendance figures at this year's World Cup, and it seems despite the outrageous prices, I think the average ticket is about, $560 US. Most of the stadiums are packed. What does this tell us? I've interviewed a lot of fans in part of my storytelling for this tournament. I've interviewed fans from Iraq, from Senegal, from Bosnia-Herzegovina who are playing, those teams played in Toronto largely. And for each one of those teams, this was a historic event. So people were willing to put out the money. Yes, the prices were completely ridiculous and inaccessible for the most people, but there was also community watch parties. There was also family watch parties. There was also an experience because at the end of the day, it's about football. Yes, it's wonderful to have been in a stadium and my job allows me to have that access. I wouldn't say mine was more meaningful because I'm in the stadium. If you're watching with the family and you're at a watch party or a fan fest or something else, it's equally as important. People can take in that experience in whatever way works for them. And I think that's what we're seeing here. Yeah, being in the stadium was great, but also thousands of people marching in the streets, be they from Bosnia-Herzegovina, be they Portuguese, be they from Senegal or Ghana. There's parties in the streets. Like, that's what this is about. Although there's some people who are going to say, Shireen, that the very fact that the tickets are the price that they are suggests that really this World Cup is for the elite. So maybe the question I have for you is, who is the World Cup really for?
Well, I'll always maintain and advocate that football is for the people. Like, anyone who has followed FIFA at any level will know that this is not new. The commercialization, capitalization of this game is not new. We've seen this. We've seen this coming. We've seen FIFA trying to capitalize on the women's side in that tournament and what that looks like. And because it's profitable and the numbers are there and the selling of the merchandise is there. I mean, these hydration breaks, we know who they're for. They're for lining the pockets of people in power. But that's why it is so important, Adrian, for communities and people to stay engaged, because the second that we turn away, this is why I don't boycott football, because the second that I start doing that, my gaze turns away from what needs to be discussed and, the accountability pieces and calling out things, which is what people need to do. We need to hang on to this in whatever way we can. And I think that any type of mega event is always going to be catered not for the people, which is why we need to stay connected at a grassroots level to the game.
What kind of social and economic impact has the World Cup had on those hosting communities across Canada, across the United States, across Mexico? Do we know yet?
Well, I'm more familiar with what happened in Canada because I reported on it. And for Toronto and Vancouver, the two mayors that are currently in office inherited this tournament because it was set years ago. So didn't necessarily want it for themselves, but inherited it as part of their tenure in office. And There's concerns about logistics. There's something that some people may not know, that with every stadium, FIFA has a beautification mandate. So for a certain distance around that stadium, it becomes FIFA property. Reading the fine print is essential here. So the beautification means that unhoused folks get displaced. And we've seen that. We saw reporting on that in Toronto and definitely in Vancouver. What would that look like? And it's reminiscent of the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver, where they took a lot of unhoused people and those with mental health issues from the east side of Vancouver and put them on a bus to Calgary, allegedly. And, I have concerns about that in my local community. I live in Toronto. I work in Toronto. I raise a family in Toronto. I'm very invested in this community. What would the impacts be? I mean, they were very clear. There was a lot of communication in terms of public transit, what it would look like. And even after the Portugal-Croatia game, I had stayed hours afterwards because I was working. But for fans and that had reached out to me to tell me there was 40,000 people exiting Toronto Stadium, and it was very organized, the manner in which the fans left. There wasn't like chaos, and there was an aerial view of that and what that looked like. I had concerns. I had concerns about the heat. They literally canceled public watch parties because of the heat. Like, I think about the impact on the city and the resources of the city. What would it look like to have so many visitors and tourists here during that period? How would it affect the people of the city, the emergency departments? How would it affect people trying to commute to work? What would that look like? So I was pleasantly surprised with the way that, for one, the GO train system was managed. They increased trains. I went to a match 5 hours early because I was so scared I would get caught. And it didn't happen. I just ended up being 5 hours early. So there's ways in which I've been surprised, but I have actually kept my eye on organizations like Rights for the Unhoused in Toronto. I had a conversation with the Secretary General of Amnesty International ahead of the tournament about what the concerns were for people there. At a tournament of this magnitude, at an event of this magnitude, there's injustices that are built into the system. And I wanted to know and keep an eye on those.
A lot of people are going to say that what matters at the end of the day is the bottom line. FIFA, prior to the World Cup, said that the World Cup could generate, I think, $3.8 billion, or rather it would contribute $3.8 billion in terms of economic output in Canada. But I'm wondering if there's something to be said about how these events, these large mega events, make people feel, or how we feel at the end of these events. I know you've talked about how enthralling the Portugal-Croatia game was for you. I think you've said that it was the best World Cup game you've ever been to. A lot of people have talked about the atmosphere at that game. So is there something to be said about the spirit of a World Cup and what it adds to a community?
Absolutely. It was the best men's World Cup game I've ever watched and ever worked. Absolutely. That's one of the things that I'm pondering. There's an essay in me, and my next column will probably be about joy. And when the world feels like a dumpster fire, Adrian, and there's so many issues around and circling this tournament, there was literally, we had a co-host nation, hosting a country that it's actively bombing in Iran. The maltreatment of that team, the obstacles put in this way. So for Iran to turn around and laud their host nation, Mexico, in Tijuana, and say how beautifully they were treated and the connection they had with these people. Yes, that's the spirit of the game that I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about in terms of let's collect these little joys where we can. Let's talk about, Team Algeria, like Le Fennec, they're called the Foxes. Let's talk about how Lawrence, Kansas embraced this team. Let's talk about how people in Lawrence, Kansas drew a huge flag in the center park of their small town. So it's really these moments of humanity. And I get back to saying this, I sound like a broken record. It's about the people. This game is about the people, and that's what we're seeing. So I do like those stories. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to issues that are of utmost importance and urgency, but I will pause, smell the flowers, have a laugh, look at the way people are engaging with this, how they use this as a vehicle for joy and connection with others.
In one of your articles, you asked the question, is football uniting the world or using a framework that excludes sincere fans? There's a tendency for Canadians to turn their nose up at America or at the United States and to see Canada somehow as being morally superior to our U.S. or American cousins. But you point out the fact that the World Cup is a world event, and yet less than half of the visa applications to Canada were accepted from much of the global south, from many African countries. Can you kind of expand a little bit on that idea?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to look at, and I'm very interested in, as Canada as a co-host nation, is sometimes Canada will deflect criticism because we're neighbors to the north of the United States, which is the big bad guy, right? Systems of racism and xenophobia and oppression don't stop at the border. They exist in Canada. And for anyone that says differently, I have absolutely data, in fact, and lived experience of millions of people who would agree with me here. So what I really wanted to do was look at the trend and the visitors trend, because even anecdotally, when I was walking around, I had covered Iraq and Senegal at Toronto Stadium. Every Senegalese person that I spoke to said that anyone they knew who applied from Senegal were not given a visa. And that the visitors that we saw, the fans and supporters, were already living in Canada as students or whatnot. And that made me think, like, how accessible is this really? First of all, it's incredibly expensive to apply for a visa. It's a non-refundable fee. So if you apply for a visa and you don't get it, you don't get your money back. And I mean, that's something else that people who don't know this and, have no experience with the global south, they don't understand. It is very expensive. So I wanted to look at those numbers and say, well, look, you can't have the world's game without the world. And I did note that so many of the Iraqi supporters, because that match was predominantly Iraqi supporters, were those who had come from the United States and from within Canada. I didn't actually meet a single Iraqi fan who came from Iraq. And that made me think, like, what does this look like? Are we just talking about diaspora here, which is equally important? Like, of course, diaspora is a reflection of that place and identity. But there is something special in every World Cup that I've ever been to. There is a delegation of fans that come from that nation. And that is important. And that is authentic. And I didn't see that.
And Shireen, what is lost when those fans, those passionate, engaged fans from Senegal, from Iraq, from Cabo Verde, are not allowed, are unable to make these games?
So I think we lose the plot there. Like, the actual idea of having teams, and even if the players don't live in that nation, they live or work and play football professionally somewhere else. The people is what this is supposed. This isn't a World Cup just for expats or for people that live abroad or for the Western world. This is supposed to be the global game. You need the globe, the people from the globe, to be there. And so for me, it loses a bit of its authenticity and a bit of the purity of what it is supposed to be. It becomes out of touch.
What do you think the legacy of this World Cup is going to be?
Wow, that's a big one. Like, I know I've answered about what the legacy will be in Canada and that we're writing our identity and building. I hope that people remember this is a tournament for the people. I hope the struggles don't get overshadowed. And I think FIFA relies on the fact that the issues, sort of amount and then they get talked about. But when the football starts, we forget. I hope that people remember the good and the bad. I hope that people recognize there's certain areas that won't be acceptable. This type of fraud or type of corruption or blatant political interference. That's not, like, for anyone to be like, oh, what Donald Trump did was worse than others. There's always political interference. You don't think that the draw being held in DC was a whole political? You don't think that Iran first being told that their camp would be in the United States and then having to move to Mexico, you don't think that was political? There's so many things that are political here. But I do hope that despite the politics, people got a chance to embrace the joy.
Shireen Ahmed, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to In Bed with the Elephant, a production of Ricochet Media. Let us know what you think about our show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcasts. The producer, editor, and sound engineer of In Bed with the Elephant is Dave Sarazin. The video editor is Dennis Gonzales. Executive producers Ethan Cox and Andrea Houston. Music by Parker Harewood. Production assistants Desiree Nikfardjam and Sophia de Guzman Rivadeiro. Graphics by Sarwa Abdul. Interns Gabriel Ryan and Juan Suarez. I'm Adrian Harewood. See you next time. Portions of In Bed with the Elephant are recorded at Carleton University's School of Journalism and Communication. Email sjcstudios@carleton.ca for a list of available podcast services and prices.